Here we are. We are at the White House. Dr. Posobiec.
Yes, look at this.
Yeah, I know. Look at this. We're in the Indian room, Indian Treaty Room, it's called.
It's a Navy library at one point.
Navy Library. I want to make sure we're getting out there. Caleb, are we broadcasting now?
Yep, you're live. You're doing it live.
Good. So what's happened today is they brought a group of digital content providers together here in the Indian Treaty Room. White House Commons, technical
Compound.
And you guys also, Jack Posobiec, fans of Jack. He's been on the show before. He was one of the folks that was sort of invited. We were invited here to interview some accountants. Any standouts from today?
For me, really, Secretary Scott Bassett.
That's what I was thinking. I got a few questions in on that.
I got three. I did get three. And I had actually gone on the Ukraine trip with Secretary Bessent, which, I mean, they called me about this a few weeks ago when he went over this mineral deal that they were talking about with Zelensky to try to create an economic basis to end the war. But of course, didn't sign it there. And we saw what happened. And Zelensky came literally right here to the White House. And so we chatted about that. He actually says there's been some movement on the Ukraine deal since then on this mineral deal, because apparently President Trump believes that having an economic tie between the U.S. and Ukraine is a sort of de facto security guarantee for Trump.
I worry about that because that was one of the arguments at the outset of the First World War, that relationships were so good economically amongst the various Balkanized countries that
And it ended up not working at all.
it ended up not working at all. But I would argue that with that in mind, there is a difference in terms of this essential minerals, or was it for lithium or something, or what are they going after? Trace elements.
Lithium, graphite, trace element.
But those things are so important that my bet is we would defend those things. It's not just the economic entitlement. Somebody, Russia, we would defend them,
Right, because
which is a different thing.
Right, what happened in World War I was that the countries went to war with each other, even though Germany and Russia at the time had economic traits.
Correct. Because of the rail policy.
Right, and I don't see particularly an appetite or a chance for the U.S. and Ukraine to go to war.
No, nor would it be Russia coming in.
Nor would it be Russia coming in, and then the idea being that, well, since these are ours, and conceivably we would have American commercial entities there and workers and vice presidents.
So the point is, it's more than just an economic entitlement. There's this national security implication that we might want to. Anyway,
right.
But so one thing I want to say before I get out there.
But it's a really interesting discussion.
It is fascinating. But just the fact that, first of all, the interesting thing to me, just to get off that topic for a second, is that here we are. There's the Secretary of Education across the room. I'm looking at Lena
Haba is
here,
now going to
right
be
there,
the U.S. attorney to New Jersey. The head of the EPA I think he's still here.
Talking about the state steel, Viva Fry,
Secretary of Health.
The point is,
Kennedy was in and out.
Bobby was great. I'll talk about him in a second. But the point is that with the simple technology that we can hold in our hands, we're probably reaching as many people as, say, CNN reaches now, because this is where people.
Hopefully more than that.
But the point is that we can reach so many people with these extraordinarily cost-efficient tools we now have, right? And we can do it in real time, long form. As it's happening, we're here with these people in the White House reporting on their work.
And credit where it's due, the fact that the Trump administration is embracing and understanding that new media, podcasts, social media, live streams, that's where the people are now.
Well, so many people are trying to recreate. We need our own Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is a bright guy that has conversations.
Right.
That's Joe Rogan. And you're a bright guy, you have conversations. People are going to want to speak with interesting people. We want to hear. I learned a lot from it today. I talked back to the Secretary of Treasury, talked to him about his house in Charleston, which is an important historical.
I've heard about it. I haven't gone all the way down the rabbit.
He had to let it go. And he said some very important decisions. He said some terrible decisions were made there that led to all kinds of problems during the Civil War, including secession. And we also talked about.
Well, that's that Southern pride.
We also talked about GDP and manageable debt and how much. I was asking him, first of all, what does he expect GDP to be? 3%. And he said Trump is in the position. I also started asking about cost cutting and the whole Doge phenomenon. He seemed uninterested in addressing that and talking about deregulation. He's very focused on deregulation. Do you have any sense of what he wants to do with deregulation? He gives himself as a businessman. I mean, he's a and he understands the encumbrances. Has he spoken specifically?
We talked about Ukraine, we talked tariffs, which Liberation Day, et cetera, something about the auto parts coming up. We didn't talk more about trade.
So what does he feel about tariffs? I didn't know.
For him, the sense that I got is that isn't that he's pro tariff in the sense that we need tariffs everywhere, everywhere and everything all the time. But it's more that sense that the way I actually it was that and I worked in the Chamber of Commerce in China. And briefly, super low level, et cetera. But one thing that I learned while being there was it's almost impossible for a U.S. company or any Western company to sell into the Chinese market. Want to 1.5 billion, depending on your metric of choice. And so obviously every company, every capitalist wants to sell into that market. That's why the lithium wars happened 9 years ago. The French wanted to get in there. The East India Company. So the idea, though, that there's something barriers our companies to be able to sell into China, and that's nothing for barriers for anyone coming into our country. That's one of these that obviously and are selling our treasury bills around the world and selling bonds around the world is a huge part of it. It's created this massive trade balance. And what he was talking about was how this has played a role in hollowing out the middle class of the country, hollowing out middle America, leading to death and despair, not under 30 years, and using tariffs as a tool, but a lever. Not the only thing, but it might be one of the easier things because it's something everyone has around the world, a system already in place for. It can easily be turned right.
Do you know who got in Trump's ear that got him to be so enthusiastic about tariffs? It seemed to come out of all of a sudden like this thing.
It's interesting because I haven't heard the backstory on that. I suspect there is one, but when you hear him talk about it and the way that he talks about President McKinley, the way that he talks about American history, which isn't particularly a popular, part of it. People know McKinley's vice president, who became president when he was assassinated by a deranged socialist, Teddy Roosevelt. So sure, people know about Teddy Roosevelt. You don't really hear people talking about McKinley that much, and yet when to hear President Trump tell the story, he's giving these, very acute details.
I would recommend a book too. I got very focused on Teddy Roosevelt one time, but I read everything I could about him, and I started thinking, I need to understand McKinley. And I read a gigantic book called "In the Time of McKinley."
Okay,
and it's extraordinary. He was an ordinary man in an extraordinary transitional period, and I don't think enough is made of Spanish American. There was a major phenomenon.
Well, I do know about that from the Navy side.
Yeah. Well, but and a lot of that was Roosevelt. He was Secretary of Navy, right? But a lot of decisions and a lot of the international.
But even went to Cuba.
Well, that's why we have Cuba. We didn't finish the Spanish American. And it's a people don't learn that lesson. Wars needing to be finished, which they never are. They never are. It's why the Philippines was such a and that's why we have Cuba. And nobody knows that. And also the fact that we destroyed the 500-year-long hegemony of the Spanish Armada in one afternoon. And I'm often reminded as things play out these days, and people on my screen have heard me say this before, that Hemingway had a famous saying, I think it was in this room about one of the characters on bankrupt, and somebody one of the other characters talked to him and he goes, how was it? How did that happen? He goes, well, it was slow, then it was fast. Right. And that's sort of the way history goes, right? I mean, it feels like we're in a fast phase right now. Yeah, I'm not sure. I want to understand it better. I feel like today may make better sense doing it and how much we should trust them. RFK Jr. amongst them. You interview him?
I didn't get a chance to this time.
Did
we,
not.
we have something else. We have discovery.
Okay. He said,
And we've had meetings in the past.
okay. He said one thing to me that made me enthusiastic. Because he's expressed how overwhelming this is and how much reason, how much intrigue there is in all this. And I pulled him aside and go, how, you're, and he goes, I'm having fun. I thought,
I like that. I like
That's
that.
it.
I like
that's all I needed to hear. That's what I wanted to hear.
especially for him, coming from where he's come from and taking the human story of, RFK Jr., who is someone who had been in the Oval Office as a child, and the journey that he took from then to now to go back to that office through Trump and through this new
Changing parties.
it's something where you really have to step back and say, look, and this is a guy, I don't know that I agree with him on every single issue, et cetera, but it's beyond that, it's beyond the politics of it. It's just, what other country could something like that happen? What other country?
And his addictions and recovery,
Oh, yeah.
all that history. You're right, it's an American story, right? If somebody were to chronicle late 20th century history, he'd be an important person to follow. It's really interesting.
Well, because it stretches all the way back from, and there's a lot of people in sort of I guess if you call it the burgeoning populist movement, where they talk about the Kennedys as sort of this huge gasp of populism that gets snuffed out, and then that's a particular strain, and then so you have the Kennedy name that sort of lives in that party, but it just becomes a sort of run-of-the-mill mainstream Democrat supporting apparatus. Since then you've Ted Kennedy and kind of overseeing these things. They were not popular. So the immigration bill was not popular.
What do we mean when we say populistic? I get so confused by that term. To me, it just sounds democratic. What do we?
Well, it should, right? It should. And populist in the sense that, so you're conservative. A conservative is someone who believes that it's ideological.
Yeah.
Liberalism is ideological.
Right.
Libertarianism is ideological. Socialism is ideological. Communism is not ideological, and as you and I have discussed in my book last year.
Yeah.
It's just resentment and envy, and you actually gave me a very good definition of the word envy last time I was on. But populism, I think, as best as I can really tell, is just listening to people, finding out what problems are, and then trying to fix them.
Why is that a pejorative term? I would just call that governance.
It's a pejorative term. It's a pejorative term because there's no money in it. There's no money in it.
It's pretty scary.
There's money in big war. There's money in big pharma. There's money in big medicine. There's money in big ag and all of these things out there. There's money in industry. There's money in multinational corporations and globalization. But there's no money. There's no lobbyists for just average people. But there can be if you have the populist that comes along with money and says, I'm going to come in like this and actually try to. And being worried. And I see this right now as well because there's two sides of the point. There's the side that doesn't Trump with all in the front, the way he rose into office, the whole thing put together. But there's another side. There's the Luigi Mangione side. There's the side of burning down Tesla dealerships. It's populist, but with a tinge of resentment and toxicity and anger and that envy and that I don't want things to be better for everyone. I just want to see these people suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a huge thing. That's part of the human condition. I think it's part of human nature. I think it's something that we all have that we're born with. It's part of our psychology. I understand it. But at the same time, when you have political movements that play into these things, like we are seeing now with the elements that AOC at Bernie rallies right now, they can become very
Yeah, it makes me sad to think that the AOC said something that day, goes, if you're interested in helping people you don't know, you're looking at it's all interested. It's like, we're all interested in how to do it properly and let people thrive and not make them domesticated animals or unhappy or all the things we've done. I want to mention lobbyists. I get overcome by history here. Here comes my producer. Are we okay?
He probably has everything to do.
Okay. But you know where the term lobbyist came from?
Where? It's in one.
Where?
I thought it's Congress, right?
At the Wilbur Hotel on the other side of the White House.
Really?
Lobby, it's and it's not the Willard.
Oh, Willard. Yeah.
Willard. I always called it Wilbur. It's the Willard. The original building was wooden.
My brother's got a meeting there this afternoon.
Well, the original building burned down where the term came from, but they rebuilt it quickly after that. These were the guys that hang around in the lobby waiting for the congressman to come by and have a drink or whatever.
So it's
They stayed in the Willard too. A lot of them stayed there.
So it's always been that way.
Well, that was the mid-19th century. That term came. So it's not always been that way. The founders had it that way.
But I think of the a medieval court or courts of antiquity.
Well,
there's always going to be, the folks who come around and now having seen sort of the way power works up close and realize it's, we have different names for it. We dress it up, but human nature does not change. It is quite
100%. Did you learn anything new today? Anything stand out?
I think I learned more in terms of the way systems work here at the White House, and I learned more about different nodes to be able to get access to. I hadn't been 100% clear on this. This is the second time I've been here since President Trump returned to office. I was here also in the first administration, and you always think of.
I got more clarity about education from Secretary Command, and it's going. They're going to do what they got to do.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, she's going to work with Congress.
We did. I did check with Secretary Besson, and I asked him. I suppose on a newsy note, I checked. So Secretary Besson, to be clear, if you make less than $150,000, you have to pay tax. I said, please pay your taxes.
Yeah.
I know there's a rumor going around, but please pay your taxes.
I would love to see something like that in place.
I'm going to have to do things.
Oh my gosh, this is terrible. The people. I heard the IRS is getting inundated with calls. Do I have to?
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
So the name of your book again?
The name of the book, and it's really taken off again with these Tesla terrorists and Luigi and the cult of Luigi that's built up around him. It's Unhumans: The Secret History of Communist Revolutions and How to Crush Them. And it really teaches how the further you go on the left, there is an element that is not ideological. It is pure resentment.
We talked about resentment and envy last time. We'll give you another word to go with the cult of Luigi. It's a term called, the term is hybristophilia. Hybristophilia is love of criminals.
Love of criminals.
And it's the women that go after the guys. It's hybristophilia.
No, this was I think Bundy got married when he was in jail.
Hybristophilia. Don't hybristophilia. The Luigi thing is hybristophilia.
100%.
It's pathological. We have names for it, for God's sake.
Well, we'd love to have you back on the show soon and do this all again. We had kind of crummy audio, so we're just going to say thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Why sorry the audio was so bad, but we got a little bit of us anyway.
Something's going on.
Is it echoey?
You sound like you're underwater, but we did the interview anyways. But next time I'll pop an earbud in and
Fix it post.
yeah.
Pleasure.
You got it.
Always a pleasure.
Bye-bye. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.